This is a true story experienced by a man named Demas. In 2018, he moved into a boarding house on the outskirts of the city to pursue a new job at a company. The boarding house seemed ordinary, though slightly older than the surrounding buildings. However, the landlady, Mrs. Sari, seemed unusually hurried when renting the room to Demas. "At night, do not open the window and always lock your room door," she said with a serious tone. Demas simply nodded, thinking it was just a normal precaution. However, from the very first night, he began to sense something strange. Around 2 a.m, Demas was awakened by a faint knocking on his window. His heart pounded. He peeked outside but saw no one. Feeling uneasy, he tried to go back to sleep. The next night, the sound returned. This time, it was clearer, like fingernails scraping against the glass. A chill ran down Demas's spine. He remembered Mrs. Sari's warning and chose to stay silent. However, things became even stranger when he started hearing footsteps in the hallway every night. When he peeked outside, the corridor was empty.
One evening, Demas chatted with a longtime tenant, Mr. Joko. From him, he learned that the room Demas occupied had once belonged to a young woman named Rina. She had been found dead in that very room under horrific circumstances, and since then, strange occurrences had plagued the boarding house. "She often knocks on the window at night looking for someone," Mr. Joko said with a serious face. Demas felt a wave of real fear. He tried to ignore everything that had been happening, but the disturbances only grew worse over time. One night, the knocking grew louder than ever before. This time, Demas mustered the courage to peek outside. What he saw nearly made him faint. A long-haired woman stood outside the window staring at him with empty eyes. Demas immediately pulled his blanket over himself, trembling in terror. But then, a soft sobbing sound filled the room. It was as if someone was crying in the corner of his room. He fought his fear and turned on the light, but there was no one there. The next morning, Demas went to see Mrs. Sari and told her everything. Her face turned pale. "I told you not to open the window or go out at night," she said anxiously. Finally, Mrs. Sari called a religious leader to cleanse the room. During the ritual, the air inside the room felt heavy and cold. The leader then discovered something hidden behind the wall, a piece of white cloth stained with dried blood. "This belonged to Rina," he said. "Her spirit is still trapped here." After prayers and rituals were performed, the eerie atmosphere in the boarding house began to fade. Demas no longer heard the knocking on the window or the footsteps in the hallway. After everything that happened, Demas decided to move out of the boarding house. However, before he left, he saw something that convinced him he had made the right decision. As he walked away, he turned back for one last look at his window. And there, behind the fogged glass, he saw Rina's shadow smiling at him. Demas ran without looking back, vowing never to return. Yet he could not shake the feeling that Rina's spirit was still watching his every step. In the summer of 2015, a young traveler named Daniel set out on a backpacking trip across Southeast Asia. He had read about a mysterious, abandoned hotel in Malaysia, said to be one of the most haunted places in the world. The hotel, built in the 1980s, was meant to be a luxurious retreat, but due to a series of tragic events, including unexplained deaths of workers during construction, it was left unfinished. Rumors of ghostly sightings, eerie sounds, and a cursed atmosphere surrounded the place. Despite the warnings from locals, Daniel, an avid urban explorer, decided to visit the hotel and document his experience. What he encountered there would haunt him forever. As Daniel arrived at the location, an unsettling silence filled the air. The structure loomed before him, partially overtaken by nature, its broken windows and crumbling walls whispering forgotten secrets. He set up his camera and flashlight, determined to explore its dark hallways. The moment he stepped inside, the temperature dropped noticeably. The air was thick with an unshakable sense of unease. As he walked deeper into the building, the sound of distant whispers echoed through the corridors. At first, he thought it was the wind, until he distinctly heard his own name being called. Daniel spun around, but no one was there. Ignoring his growing fear, Daniel continued deeper into the hotel. He entered what appeared to be the main lobby, where decayed furniture and shattered chandeliers still hung from the ceiling. He set his camera on a tripod, hoping to capture any paranormal activity. Then, suddenly, a door down the hallway slammed shut with a deafening bang. His heart pounded as he turned his flashlight toward the noise. Shadows flickered across the walls, shifting unnaturally. He took a hesitant step forward when a cold breath grazed the back of his neck. Spinning around, he saw a shadowy figure standing at the far end of the hall, barely visible in the dim light. Daniel grabbed his camera and ran. As he sprinted through the corridors, he heard footsteps behind him, heavy and deliberate. No matter how fast he ran, the sound remained just a few steps behind. Desperate, he burst into one of the rooms and slammed the door shut, pressing his back against it as his breath came in ragged gasps. The footsteps stopped outside the door. For a few moments, there was only silence. Then, the doorknob began to turn slowly. Daniel held his breath. The knob rattled violently, as if someone, or something, was trying to force its way inside. He clutched his flashlight, ready to fight, but then the noise stopped. When he finally gathered enough courage to open the door, the hallway was empty. But his camera, which he had left rolling, captured something terrifying. Reviewing the footage later that night in his hotel room, Daniel saw it. Just behind him in the hallway was a blurry, humanoid figure with hollow eyes. Its mouth appeared to be open in a silent scream. The most chilling part? The entity seemed to get closer with every frame until, in the final shot, it was right behind him. Shaken, Daniel decided to leave town immediately. But as he packed his bags, his hotel room door creaked open on its own. A whisper filled the air. "You shouldn't have come." Daniel returned home, but he was never the same. Shadows seemed to move in the corners of his vision. His name was whispered in the dead of night. Electronics flickered whenever he entered a room. Desperate, he reached out to a paranormal expert, who told him that he had brought something back with him. To break the curse, Daniel was advised to return to the abandoned hotel and seek forgiveness from the spirits. A year later, Daniel was found dead in his apartment, his expression frozen in terror, his camera destroyed beyond recognition. The footage? Still missing. Throughout history, there have been stories of people who disappear without a trace, vanishing as if they were never there. But what if the place itself disappears too? This is the terrifying account of a room that existed one moment and was gone the next, leaving behind only fear and unanswered questions. This story takes place in Japan, a country known for its deep history and eerie urban legends. It is said to be based on real testimonies from former hotel employees, travelers, and paranormal investigators who have encountered the impossible. In the heart of Tokyo, an old business hotel stood for decades. It wasn't luxurious, but it had a reputation for being reliable and affordable for travelers. However, there was one detail that was whispered among the staff: Room 207. A hotel receptionist named Akiko had worked there for 5 years and always avoided booking guests into that room. The reason? Strange occurrences had been reported time and time again. Guests would complain of hearing soft whispers in the night, objects moving on their own, and an overwhelming sense of dread whenever they stayed there. Some even checked out early, refusing to say what they had experienced. One evening, a businessman named Hiroshi arrived at the hotel after a long day of meetings. He was exhausted and requested any available room. Without checking the system properly, the new receptionist, unaware of the rumors, assigned him room 207. That night, Hiroshi settled into his room, feeling relieved to finally get some rest. As he lay in bed, he noticed something strange. His phone kept losing signal, and the air in the room felt unnaturally heavy. He brushed it off as exhaustion and closed his eyes. At exactly 2:07 a.m., he was jolted awake by the sound of someone whispering right beside his ear. His entire body froze. The whispers were incoherent, but they grew louder and louder, as if multiple voices were speaking at once. Panicked, Hiroshi reached for the bedside lamp, but it wouldn't turn on. The room remained pitch dark. Then he heard it. Slow, deliberate footsteps circling his bed. His breath quickened. Was someone inside the room? He fumbled for his phone and turned on the flashlight. The moment the light illuminated the room, the whispers stopped. The footsteps ceased. Everything was silent. Then something even more terrifying happened. The hotel telephone rang. Trembling, Hiroshi picked up. "Get out!" A voice, distorted and inhuman, whispered through the receiver. Without hesitation, Hiroshi grabbed his things and ran out of room 207. When he reached the front desk, his face was pale, and he was shaking uncontrollably. "I need another room," he gasped. The night staff exchanged worried glances but complied. He was moved to a different floor, but Hiroshi didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, Hiroshi checked out and warned the receptionist about his terrifying experience. However, when she checked the records, something strange happened. There was no record of him staying in room 207. In fact, according to the system, room 207 didn't exist. Shocked and confused, Hiroshi insisted, "I was in that room last night." The hotel manager was called, and after some hesitation, he revealed something chilling. Room 207 was permanently closed 10 years ago. It was walled off after a guest mysteriously disappeared inside. Hiroshi's blood ran cold. "But I was there," he stammered. "You couldn't have been," the manager said grimly, "because that room was sealed shut." After leaving the hotel, Hiroshi couldn't shake off the feeling that something was terribly wrong. He began researching the history of the building and found reports of a tragic case from 10 years earlier. A woman named Yuki had checked into room 207 and was never seen again. Her belongings were found inside, but she was gone without a trace. The police investigated, but there was no sign of forced entry or escape. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. After multiple complaints from other guests about the room, the hotel decided to seal it off. They walled it up, erasing its existence from the hotel's layout. So how had Hiroshi stayed in a room that no longer existed? He contacted the hotel again, demanding answers. But when he arrived back at the building, something even more disturbing happened. The hallway where room 207 should have been was gone. There was only a smooth, empty wall. Determined to uncover the truth, Hiroshi reached out to a paranormal investigator named Takashi, who had studied similar cases of vanishing rooms across Japan. Takashi explained that places where people mysteriously disappear often become trapped in time, creating spaces that exist in an in-between state. Sometimes, under the right conditions, these lost places briefly reappear, pulling unsuspecting people into their nightmare. "You were lucky," Takashi told Hiroshi. "You managed to escape. But others, they never do." Chills ran down Hiroshi's spine. What if he had stayed in that room a little longer? What if he had ignored the warning on the telephone? Would he have disappeared just like Yuki? No one knows for sure, but one thing is certain. If you ever check into an old hotel and something feels off, trust your instincts. Because sometimes a room isn't just haunted. Sometimes it's not supposed to exist at all. The story of room 207 remains one of the most chilling mysteries in Japan. Whether it was a glitch in time, a haunted room, or something far more sinister, one thing is clear. There are places in this world that defy explanation. Would you dare stay in a hotel with a hidden room? Let us know in the comments. And remember, next time you check into a hotel, make sure all the rooms actually exist. Thank you for watching this story. Stay safe, and see you in the next terrifying story.